Greetings, members, one and all of the Salivation Nation. 14.6 million ounces of gold appears out of thin air. Let's explore. With a title like that, you probably didn't even need to look at this thumbnail or the vision that you see before you to know what this is about. And I'm going to be referencing an article that was posted on Numismatic News a few days ago from Patrick Heller. It's quite intriguing to see exactly where gold comes from and how typically whenever there's a mystery, well, the Chinese are involved. He states that in 2003, China's central bank began adding to its reported 600 tons of gold reserves. That's about 19.3 million ounces. And the author had heard reports of these purchases from a gold analyst friend who said his source was an anonymous bullion dealer who claimed to have handled some of these purchases. Periodically, his friend would pass along the amounts being spent to purchase Chinese gold reserves. But since there was no other source of confirmation that this was happening, in other words, it was essentially a friend who knew another friend, well, you know how those things happen, rumors get started, he didn't want to pass along the unverified story. In 2005, he received information from another source that this activity was underway and began writing about it. But it wasn't until the 24th of April, 2009, that the Chinese central bank announced it had been purchasing gold reserves since 2003, adding a total of 454 more tons, that's 14.6 million ounces, to what it had already reported as reserves from 2003 up to that date. In a world where new gold mine output was approaching 100 million ounces annually, this was a large enough quantity that it had to come from somewhere. It wasn't just rounding errors. It does seem pretty curious indeed, although we know they can't get exact as a number of gold because the gold market is quite broad and they don't take into account probably illegal gold mining, which is still a problem today. There are companies that specialize in tracking precious metals market activity, including new mine output, recycled scrap, official sales and purchases, central bank leasing activities, movements in and out of exchange-traded funds, commodity market inventory receipts and deliveries, and the like. They then assemble this accumulated research on supply, demand, and inventories to sell it to market participants. Among the reports, these entities produce the annual statements of market activity. In these annual reports from 2003 through 2009, the stated new supplies were all noted as having gone to other destinations, with none of the gold supply or inventory going to China's central bank. So that's pretty interesting and curious. You would think that a discrepancy in supply of this magnitude would have these reporting companies desperate to figure out where their research had gone off track. They would need to do this to reassure their paying customers that future reports would be even more accurate than in years past. So identifying the source of the 14.6 million ounces of gold has never been corrected by these companies, at least as far as the author can tell. Since it had come from somewhere, there's all we can do is speculate at this point as to where it arrived or how it got here. The government and central banks have been trying to manipulate the price of gold ever since the creation of the U.S. Exchange Stabilization Fund in 1934. Remember, that's where they had to fix the price of gold in the United States. That is obvious manipulation rather than the free market supplying the price of gold. Almost always, the tactics were intended to hold down gold's price. However, if people were aware that such price fixing was taking place, that would lessen the impact of such rigging. Well, I don't know how many people were aware that it occurred from 1934 all the way up to the 70s or what have you, but nonetheless, much of the suppression of gold and also silver prices for more than 85 years has taken place out of the public eye, with the exception of the highly publicized Bank of England gold sale from 1999 to 2002, the Swiss National Bank gold sales from 2000 to 2008, and the International Monetary Fund gold sales from 2009 and 2010. Well, they sold at very low prices. At least I know that's what the Bank of England did under Gordon Brown. So that kind of doesn't make sense to me, but I move on here. How could the market be supplied with physical gold that didn't have any apparent source? That is a good question. The most likely culprits are one of or more of central banks that leased gold, sold or swapped gold reserves to provide physical gold to the market, but did not disclose that it had done so. There is an enormous volume of such activity that is acknowledged. Jessica Cross, a longtime mainstream analyst of the precious metals market, estimated that about 15 to 25% of all central bank gold holdings were out on lease. In contrast, Frank Veneroso, a consultant to the World Bank and several central banks among his clientele, projected that 25 to 50% of central bank gold holdings were out on lease. This indicates that possibly more than 100 to 200 million ounces of central bank physical gold may have leaked into the market over the decades without being disclosed, specifically to help suppress gold's price. If so, that would be the most likely source of the gold sold to the Chinese central bank from 2003 to 2009. There is another complicating factor in tracking central bank and international institution gold reserves. Up until several years ago, if one central bank leased gold to another central bank, the IMF required that both central banks report the same quantity of gold as being part of their gold reserves. When the IMF changed this requirement, it didn't prohibit both central banks from still reporting this leased gold as part of their gold reserves. Instead, it simply allowed, but did not require the central bank that it had leased out the gold and no longer have physical custody of the metal to stop including this on reported gold reserves. Despite some pretenses of transparency, a lot of activity in the gold market is unreported and opaque. This is obviously a good amount of market manipulation happening. At least that's what the author thinks. I think it's probably a little bit more complicated than that. I believe probably it just depends on the transparency of the individual nations and the central banks there, especially China. With China, we can't rule anything out as to what they do with their gold and how they report it. In fact, now people are questioning, as far as their move to a metric standard of gold, which I refuse to buy any of those gold pieces. They're using the grams instead of ounces. But nonetheless, that move, especially what we saw in 2015, where their gold and silver products were a little bit underweight for that year, that transition year, and there's no markings on this coin as to what that weight actually is. So I don't know. The Chinese government, I don't trust them in terms of their gold. And of course, we know what's coming out of China is a heck of a lot of fakes that are making its way into the bullion markets, fake gold and silver. And the Chinese government does not seem to be doing a whole lot to stop that kind of activity, where I believe they could. They have so much control over their population, you would think they would be able to stop that activity unless they are encouraging it. Nonetheless, there is some activity, unreported, opaque, we know about, and we saw there was a settlement agreement that was filed with the Federal Court of Manhattan where Barclays PLC, Scotiabank, London Gold Market Price Fixing Limited have agreed to pay a combined additional fine of $50 million to settle antitrust litigation over alleged rigging of the London fix. So all three of these banks are among the 24 primary trading partners of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. So that certainly is curious. But my feeling is that really their motivation for suppressing the price of gold, if that's the case, is, I don't know. It's, to me, there's just not enough excitement here, especially in the West, for gold, that to really be a thing. I think there's really more likely a chance that there's the focus of this missing gold should really focus more on China than anything else. Notwithstanding, we do know that obviously central banks and governments themselves, the Federal Reserve and the like, manipulate everything in terms of the economy. I think, and by association, well, gold is affected as well. But very interesting story. We can see here, as this display before you, that gold has certainly gone up in price from years gone by. And so they haven't been able to do too much to keep it down, as this ounce of gold was purchased for under $430. Where I purchased this, I got a little bit of a deal on this, not by a whole lot, but nonetheless, there is that. And gold is a metal that will certainly intrigue us in how it arrives and how it's reported. And by the way, the reporting of gold by the World Gold Council and other agencies is at the mercy of the institutions and how it enters the market. And I believe there may be just as much to this 14.6 million ounces of where this gold came from, probably from dirty gold sources, or gold that has been sourced from illegal mining operations. And the author of this article has not touched upon that as a possibility. And I think there may be more clues to that, because obviously that kind of gold entering the marketplace is obviously there, but they may not want to disclose their sources because, well, it's dirty gold, and so they don't want to bring attention to that and have to pay any kind of consequences of how they accumulated that gold. Just a possibility, just a theory that I have, and certainly not discounting some of what was said in this article as well, but I think that should have been mentioned. But nonetheless, the gold market is large enough, and where this stuff comes in and how it's accumulated, there's a variety of different things, and you're going to have to recognize or come to the conclusion, to the understanding that there's going to be some of this, well, it's going to just be untrackable or untraceable. Even with technology these days, they're trying to crack down on it. You heard me report about Dubai and the UAE cracking down on some of that illegal gold mining. And as to the gold that comes through there, will be mines and refiners will need to be audited every year. And that's a start. Of course, some people, that raises red flags for others about that situation too. People have strong opinions about these matters. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. We'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for taking the time to watch, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.